This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. This podcast will interview entrepreneurs, business owners, and people in their careers. We will delve into their journey to success, key life milestones, and go deep into their area of expertise. This podcast will inspire and educate you with great guests. Get ready to learn from other successes and failures. Today we have Ollie Phillips, which is the part 2 of the interview with Ollie. Previously we spoke about his rugby career. We are now going to go into more of his business career. Hi Ollie, how are you?
I'm great, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me back. Clearly, I waffled on so long last time that we had to do it twice. So
it was kind of like I do quite a detailed research, and I know last time I think you had a hard close, so we decided to do the second episode. So thank you for joining me. So the first question I wanted to ask you was, so after your rugby career had ended and you were looking for other activities, and you've done a cross-section of lots of different things, but I want to start you on your MBA that you did in 2016. So what made you decide that you needed an MBA at that stage?
I think basically I just sort of came back into the big bad world and I was fortunate. I went and sailed around the world and met the senior partner from PwC who gave me said you need to come work for us. And I turned up with a bag of a load of energy. Oh, the lights in my office have just decided to time out, which is always good, isn't it? Always need the motion sensors just to get them back on. And I just think I'd done whatever it was, 6 months of work within PwC infrastructure, and realised that whilst I was turning up with bags of energy and enthusiasm, I didn't actually know anything about business. I didn't really know. All these conversations and words and phrases and anagrams and whatever else that I was listening to, I was like, I don't know what any of this means. And I can't, there's faking it till you make it, but I need to put myself into an environment whereby I'm surrounded by people that know what they're talking about, and equally I can get much more clarity and expedite my learning. And I'd always been I was going to go to Cambridge when I was at Durham University, and I didn't at the end to do a postgrad, and I didn't. I went and played rugby. So there was always this sort of romance and allure of Cambridge, and obviously it's an incredible institution as it is. And I just thought, I need to go and do an executive MBA. I need it to be near London. I actually applied to Oxford and to Cambridge. I got into both, and then I just thought I'm going to do Cambridge. So it was hard. It was bloody expensive, but it was invaluable just for the people that I met, the experience itself, and the learnings that I got out of it. And if anything, I left actually probably even frustrated that I didn't make the most of it while I was there, because there's just so much you can do. I mean, literally you could consume yourself, but I did the exec program, which meant I was still in industry. I was still working at PwC at the same time.
Right, okay. We'll come back to the MBA. I just want to have the story of how you got your PwC role. So you said you met a partner while you were sailing. Tell me a little bit about that.
So when I got injured from playing at the World Cup, I was in a sort of fairly desperate position, didn't really know what to do. It was the only career I'd known all my life, 12 years. And actually a friend of mine, a guy called Sir Robin Knox-Johnson, he's the first person to ever single-handedly sail around the world. He'd had a company for about 14, 15 years called the Clip Around the World race that allows anyone over the age of 18 to go and sail around the world. You do a bit of training with him and then you can sail around the world. Yeah. And he rang me up just after we'd been humped by New Zealand in the World Cup final, 33-3, but didn't realise that I'd obviously severed the nerve of my calf, and said, do you want to go do this sail race? And obviously I was in a fairly desperate point in time. It's like, yes, done. So I leapt on this boat to go sail around the world. Didn't really realise what the hell I was throwing myself in for. 11 months at sea and 46,000 miles or whatever it was later. But the interesting part of it was probably like the ultimate job interview of all time, because it was this life experience whereby you were each time was London to Rio was a month at sea or 28 days at sea, whereby you were in a 70-foot space surrounded by a load of people that you never met before. And they'd all taken, some of them were taking a full year out from their life, total career break. Others were doing it as a bit of a sabbatical or whatever, and doing like a month or a couple of months, a leg here and there. So it was a very eclectic group of people with different priorities. And one of the guys on my boat happened to be a senior partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, who they owned quite a few bits of property in Cape Town. So he wanted to go to Cape Town, be in his property, and do what was recognized as like the hardest leg, the most brutal leg of it all, which is the Southern Ocean from Cape Town to Australia. And I didn't know where he was. I didn't know what he did. I didn't know anything about PwC, to be honest, but he was on my team, on my watch. And when he got off the boat after a month of like being thrown around like a rag doll on the ocean, he just said, look, I don't care what you do, but whatever you do, you have to come work for us. And I was like, who's us? He's like, PwC. And I was like, well, and if I'm honest, at the time, I was still fairly adamant that I was going to go back and play rugby. I thought I was just going to have a year out and my leg would be fine. So I was like, yeah, mate, whatever, of course. I've got another 7 months or whatever it was left of the race. You've gone mad. Clearly, being at sea for 11 months has sent you for a month has sent you delirious. Have a good time. And funny enough, when we finished the whole sort of sail around the world, 7 months later, he was waiting at St. Catherine's Dock for all of us as we came in to sort of celebrate with the team, what have you. And he gave me a massive hug. I hadn't even stepped on dry land. And he's just congratulations, etc., etc. And then he said, and when do you come work for us? And I was like, mate, bloody hell, you're joking me. And I'm going to go play rugby. So I tried to play rugby for 6 months, realized my body was absolutely ruined, and call it serendipity. But he rang me that night that I knew in my gut that my sort of career was done. I couldn't play anymore. And he said, look, it's all moved in the right direction. We want to make you a director and come lead our digital transformation team in tax. I was like, yes, done. Desperate. I need a job, quick, in. And I rang him the day before I started. I was like, Michael, I'm really, really sorry, but just a couple of bits. But I don't know anything about digital. I don't know anything about tax, and I don't know anything about PwC. And he said, don't worry, you'll be perfect. And 5.5 years later, I'm still there. And bizarrely, he's not. He left after about a year. So that was brilliant. But there we go.
So it's interesting. So you went into PwC, and as you said, you very much were not used to the culture, the atmosphere. It's very different to a rugby team, I would imagine, as I've worked at PwC myself. So how was it going into this alien environment? And as you say, we'll come back to your MBA in a minute, but just like that first day turning up, is it like the first day at school all over again, where you're being introduced to people and things? How was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, so I had it sounds like this weird script, you can write it, but I had agreed with a charity that I do a lot of work with that I would go and lead a load of people, that supporters of the charity, up on a world record attempt in the North Pole.
Okay.
So when Michael had offered me this job and said, look, we want you to bring us a director, I was like, look, this is brilliant, but just a small thing, I can't really start until May because I've agreed to go to the North Pole with this expedition. So this was in December. He was like, okay, well, that's not a problem. We can probably make that work. But I'd left for the North Pole not knowing when my start date was, because we were going to be in the pole for like 2 months. And I remember, I'll never forget, I came back on the 5th of May from the North Pole, landed, came into my flat at 5:30, 6 in the evening, load of post, opened all my post, and there was a letter from PwC saying, can't wait to see you for your start date. See you 8 a.m. for your onboarding process, May the 6th. So I was like, oh my God, it's tomorrow. It's tomorrow, I've got to go in. And I had grown like this huge beard as being part of the North Pole expedition, and we had to do a big sort of wrap up with all of the press and media and whatever as part of it to sort of celebrate the world record. And they'd asked for me to keep it for a week or two. So I had to turn up to PwC. You'll know from like we had our like ID docs, and have my photo as photo ID, which is still my ID pass now, with this horrific beard out here. So they must have thought some like hobo had turned up to sign at PwC, wander around the offices. And I remember like having tons of energy and being super enthusiastic about it all. It's like a new adventure, if you like.
Yeah.
And then, so that part was amazing. And then after what, I don't know, 3 months, maybe a bit longer, I suddenly became overcome by this like imposter syndrome, like where I just didn't feel like I could offer any value to anything. Like I would feel like I was sitting in meetings, I didn't understand what they meant. I felt like every question I was asking was like a dumb question, which made me feel like incredibly uncomfortable, a bit anxious. First time ever in my life that I'd been a bit uncertain about my own like self-worth. Like if you put, a rugby ball in my hand and said, hit that target over there 20 times, I'd be like, yep, boom, boom. I'd back myself to have a go at it or tactically challenge someone or whatever. But in this environment, I just wasn't comfortable. I just couldn't understand what my value was and all the things that I knew, I just didn't think were of any good. Like I could run up and down the stairs probably faster than anyone in the office, but what difference would that make? Or I could smash a few people at the photocopying machine, but I don't think that they'd be that appreciative of it. So I just was trying to figure out all these transferable skills that people were talking to me about that I've got. They're great, but if I don't actually have any substance underneath it all, I couldn't figure out how I could translate that into value with PwC, particularly in a very, if you like, complex company, but even complex sector, which was tax.
Yeah.
Tax is very complicated.
So I worked in tax for 14, 15 years, 13 years at PwC. And I must admit, the first couple of years, you really struggle with terminology and acronyms, which PwC are renowned for in the industry.
Of course. And then on top of that, it's so complicated and it's always ever changing. You've got different jurisdictions. UK tax is different to US tax and German tax, whatever else. So you need to obviously have a baseline understanding of all the various different tax complexities that an organization might be facing, and then how it impacts them in different jurisdictions. And in order to do that, most people do a ACA for 3 years, and then they slowly build up to, most directors in PwC are 12 years minimum. Some obviously exceptions to that rule, some a bit longer, whatever, but 12 years on average qualified in their specific role of whatever they're doing. And there I was, sort of 12 minutes. And my background was in, the only numbers I dealt with was sort of numbers at a line out or numbers on a scoreboard. So it was just a really, and from a psychological mental health perspective, that was definitely my most challenging time. Definitely.
Wow. So you decided to do an MBA. You thought you'd give yourself a chance, and interestingly, you didn't tax qualify. You thought an MBA was more beneficial.
I'd asked the business. I'd asked PwC whether it was of value. Like, should I go do the ACA? And the feedback I had was no. Anything you learn now, you're still going to be 12 years behind everyone else that's learnt it. So that's not your key strength. That's not what you're good at. So don't waste your time doing that bit. Do the bit that you're great at, which is, going out and meeting people and building the teams and et cetera, et cetera. And it was only, so the firm said, I shouldn't do the ACA, or they wouldn't, I shouldn't do it and they wouldn't fund it. So I'd approached them about the MBA and they said, we don't think you should do that either. So we won't fund that either. So that's why that was expensive, because I self-funded that for my own sort of development and etc. Which at Cambridge is definitely not cheap. It's expensive, and with no real understanding or clarity whether I'd get the answers out at the end of it that I wanted. But I felt like it was a good enough qualification that would give me enough exposure to all the bits that I needed, and equally give me the, if you like, the feather in my cap, or a qualification that fitted my level of seniority within the business.
Yeah. And has it worked out? Did it do everything that you wanted it to do?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it was amazing. Don't get me wrong, absolutely brilliant. As I say, the one negative or whatever is myself. It was just hindsight is obviously an amazing thing, but I wish I had fully immersed myself in reading every bit of literature that was given to us and everything else. I think I got sort of education fatigue after about 14 months or 12 months. So I was less diligent on some of the bits and pieces.
So after your MBA, you were working at PwC, and you've obviously progressed there. You're still there now. You said 5 years later, but you decided to take on a role as a writer at City AM. So City AM is a business paper in London. So you took on that role mainly as a rugby reporter, I think I saw when you were writing.
Yeah. So friends of mine, actually, a friend of mine is the founder of it, a guy called Lawson Muncaster. And he'd been talking to me for a while, sort of saying that we'd love to get you in and for your sort of personal comment in and around sport, and we think you've got some value to add around rugby. And I'd always been interested in sort of keeping a foothold back in the game, but also just doing a bit of writing. And I also thought, with my job in PwC, it was good to have a foothold in the city, and it was a good sort of way of naturally sort of being, if you like, a bit visible and whatever. So, we've done that now. It's been 3 years, I think, maybe even longer. But I write every Thursday which goes into the paper on the Friday, a review of the up and coming rugby fixtures, which just keeps me still involved in the game. If you like, I can be an armchair critic, etc., and away we go. So much easier talking about rugby than it is playing it. I can tell you that for nothing.
But so you also did Sky and Eurosport commentary as well. So you were sort of in the sort of media area.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to believe, isn't it, really? But I've got a face only that your mother can love, or as most of my mates will always tell me, a face made for radio, which is always fun. So City AM was perfect for me, but no, I think I came out of the game with there's always people with better CVs, but a relatively decent CV. I'd played rugby all around the world for England, had captained my country, had been voted at one point as the best player in the world, and equally had been voted as the best overseas player in France. So had sort of gone to a different country, playing in a different league. So that had helped too. So I think the move over to, not the move, but the ask from Sky to do that was brilliant. And again, it kept me involved in the game and playing. There definitely came a point in my decision-making process, if you like, where I was like, do I try and make this a career? Do I try and make being in TV a career, and being a presenter and a sports broadcaster and everything else like that? And I think I just, there was probably twofold. One, I think it had come at a time where I wasn't as positive about my own ability and capabilities as I could have been or should have been during that time of like my retirement and crossing over into PwC. And I also think I just thought there were so many people that are going to be chomping at this arena, to be a broadcaster or a presenter.
Yeah.
And I'm pale, male, and stale. Am I really going to be fitting the mold of this? Is also the future career that I want, of just talking about rugby all day, every day? And I just thought, I love it, and I still love doing it now, and I'm really passionate about it. And for me, it's actually the perfect balance now, because I get asked to do some stuff, but just not all the time. So I just thought, I'd actually like to just go and do something different in my career and learn a different string. And I'd love to end up back in sport, but probably on the finance side or the management side of actually running a sports team or business or something like that. I just think that's more me, if that makes sense.
It does, absolutely. And so you're a member of the Oxbridge Angels.
Yeah. Which was, so again, that's talking around the positive things that came out of my MBA at Cambridge. That's one of them. So a group of when we left, everyone's obviously got amazing ideas and they want to go in different directions. And some of the groups said, look, we want to form an angel fund. And then they asked if I would sit on the investment committee of that fund. So they were like, we want to go out and raise initially a small amount of money. So we raised something like $1 million to begin with. And then we would start investing that into interesting startups within the UK.
Yeah.
And at the same point, we've now created a VC as well alongside that, which is a bigger fund of sort of 30 million. And that's in, more advanced companies, Series A and whatever else. And again, for me, that whole process of how we do our due diligence and how we go through it all is just a massive learning curve. Like, again, we're going into that process. I was like, what do I know about this and how can I manage a fund and et cetera, et cetera. And the honest answer is I couldn't do it on my own. I can't. But luckily, there's some amazing people around me who can, and I just pull the right strings and orchestrate in the right way and ask the right questions.
So for that, so some of the companies, is there any other companies that I might know of that you've invested in?
No, we've done.
Or is it seed funding, and then you've also got another branch which is more sort of venture capital?
Yeah, so the VC one is newly established. It hasn't made an investment yet, so that one wouldn't. Yeah, we're looking at a couple, but no, nothing so far. The one company that we've invested in is called Charco Neurotech, which you wouldn't have heard of, but it's actually a potential solution to Parkinson's, not in terms of preventing people from getting Parkinson's, but actually helping them manage when they do have it. So it's a magnet that people wear that don't ask me the science and the ins and outs of it because I'm not the brains behind it all, but they wear it and it stops the tremors that people get with Parkinson's. Right. So we saw that there's quite a few medics that were on our course, and they believed it was a cracking product and good business.
Healthcare is a really good place for investment to be at the moment.
Like, yeah, of course. Exactly.
I've got a couple of friends who have investment companies, and they're literally saying we're telling all our clients just to sit tight until this pandemic thing moves over. But actually, I know it's Parkinson's, not to do with the pandemic, but actually healthcare is an area which a lot of money, a lot of interest is being plugged into at the moment.
Yeah, 100% agreed. And COVID's only seek to propel that, but I think there was a natural movement towards that anyway, just because people are living longer, our demographics are getting older, people are becoming, I guess, more susceptible to different things. And also I think COVID's woken people up to, we actually need to put in a bit of safeguarding here around future proofing and actually doing some research into safeguarding against, whether it be pandemics, big global diseases, viruses, whatever it might be. Yeah. So there is a natural movement at the moment, which is great, and we're riding on that wave.
Yeah, that's great. I've also got here that you're involved with CSSC Sports and Leisure.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So the CSSC stands for the Civil Servants Sports Council.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. Right, great.
Yeah. So I'm not a civil servant in any shape or form.
Right.
So it was twofold. One is I wanted to build up, after my MBA experience, I wanted to build up some NED experience. I wanted to sit on a couple of boards and see some different businesses and understand their business model, et cetera, et cetera. And I wanted it to be in the sporting arena. So there was it's not paid for role, but it was an advertisement around becoming a NED for a large 200,000 member organization that was focusing in and around that space of providing sports, health, leisure activities for civil servants. And I just thought this would be a great opportunity for me to be involved. And I applied to be vice chairman of that organization, did all the interview process, got the role. And it was also then coupled with, coincidentally, at the same time, probably 3 months after I got it, PwC had asked if I would become our, what we call, lead relationship partner on everything that we do with a department in government called DCMS, which is Department of Culture, Media and Sport. So it was actually a perfect, a perfect marriage, if you like. I work in and around the regions of government and culture, media, sport, digital, and I'm also sitting on as vice chairman of a group that has a whole load of civil servants in the areas of sport and leisure.
That's really. So how do you balance all of these different things that you're involved in with a full-time job at PwC?
Yeah, and 2 kids, and a wife. So how do it's just about, I guess, seeing the wood from the trees, make sure you prioritize things, being efficient with your time. And if I'm honest, I probably am victim of taking on too much at certain points in time, and it all gets a bit overwhelming. But in general, I enjoy the variety of life and the variety that these different things bring me. That's probably what engages me and keeps me entertained. If I was doing the same thing over and over and over again, I'd probably get a bit bored. So they all actually add value to one another, because when I get engaged with them, I am fully engaged with them, if that makes sense, because I've kind of missed them. So yeah, I mean, that's what I sort of enjoy and focus on, and that's how I manage it. And it's definitely not perfect, but it's getting there.
So do you procrastinate?
Yes. Unfortunately, yes. Yeah, I just sometimes get confused with what I should do, what I shouldn't do, where I should be, what I should do, etc. But in general, it all works out in the end. And a mantra I have got is surround yourself. Someone told me when I was playing at the beginning, surround yourself with loads of people that are better than you.
Yeah.
So I try to do that every single day with what I'm doing in my work, and it then tends to work out quite well, because all these people know much more than me, and it's all
and they elevate you as well, don't they? They make you better because you're learning from them all the time, aren't you? And Elon Musk has said something very similar, where he said, I didn't go to Harvard, but I employ everyone that did go to Harvard because I appreciate how good an organization it is. So it's definitely, if you can fill yourself with people that are more skilled, more knowledgeable, they'll bring on your business, they'll bring on whatever
yeah, and they just give you exposure to a greater level of thinking and thought and insight, and I think that's incredibly valuable. Whereas if you surround yourself with people that know a lot less than you, are never really going to challenge or offer a difference of opinion, then you're actually always going to just stay the same in terms of your own personal development, and that might be fine. You might be comfortable with that, and that's not a problem at all. For me, I enjoy that element of difference, and I enjoy people challenging me all the time. Don't get me wrong, there are lots of times where I struggle with it as well, where I'm like, oh God, I just feel so inferior because I don't know anything that any of these people are talking around. But you grow and evolve over time.
So you've mentioned a couple of times about this sort of imposter syndrome that you sort of struggled with initially at PwC and maybe at some of the other roles. How would you sort of say to one or a number of my listeners that are listening now who are in that sort of imposter syndrome, and they've been told fake it till you make it, or another sort of term like that? How would you sort of suggest them to how would you suggest for them to actually get over that and be able to build on from where they're feeling at the moment?
It's a great question. I don't think you ever. So I'll tell you, when I used to play for England, we used to have a saying that I see now getting brandished all over the place in management speak, but it was always that we had to get comfortable at being uncomfortable. And for us, that meant that we used to train on a Tuesday, and we used to have to do this thing where we used to have to take our heart rate up to this ridiculous level and we termed it the death zone, right? Basically, where your heart was beating and booming so fast and hard that you couldn't really concentrate, and your legs are screaming, etc. And then if you got yourself to that stage, then you could execute your core skills and play a game at that point. We would have to do a fitness test that basically took our heart rates to that point. At the end of the fitness test, when you're dying on your hands and knees, they'd say, right, play a game. Yeah. And if we could execute our core skills at that point, the logic was that when it came to game day, you'd be fine. And I was just, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you go around and get your heart rate up to ridiculous levels, because that make you feel better of like managing with all the people around you. But the if you like, the theory behind that really resonated with me, or resonates with me now, of the levels of uncomfortableness that I felt physically, I get now in different shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
My heart isn't screaming, but how I feel mentally, psychologically, the levels of anxiety or whatever I get inside me vary depending on the situation. And instead of like, I try to approach it how I approached it when I used to train, which is I used to love that feeling of, my God, my legs are screaming here, and now I've got to execute. And it's weird. It's a different, obviously, emotive state, if you like. But I try and take that same approach to what I'm doing now, which is, okay, I feel ridiculously uncomfortable here. I'm not sure of where I'm going. There's a little bit of me that would just like to go back into my comfort zone. But actually, I'll just relish this opportunity. And if I can execute at this level, and I can get some sensible questions and whatever else, it's only going to stand me in good stead for when it comes to game day.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that are going through my mind. There's a guy, and the name of the guy is eluding me at the moment, but he does things with breathing, and he makes you breathe fast for 20 or 30 times, and then you hold your breath. And the theory behind it is exactly the same. You've pushed all of the air out of your lungs, and therefore you're then responding on a more sort of natural level, and therefore it's when you're in difficult situations, your breathing will be regulated a lot easier because you've pushed your lungs to the extreme. So there's this guy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I'll have to look him up for you. And the other thing that I was thinking, I remember watching there's
a guy called Wim Hof. I don't know if you know him.
Wim Hof. That's the guy.
So he's the guy that broke the world record for swimming under the ice.
Yes.
And he just
he
controls his breathing.
In the frozen conditions.
So what you're saying, Mark, we're going to see you wandering around your underpants in freezing conditions. Is that what's happening?
Well, it is good. No, you're not. The other thing that I was going to say, more rugby related, was I remember watching this sevens competition, and they were talking about the English team at the time, and I think it was a little bit after that you were involved, and they were saying that they often, at the end of training session, they would play when after 7 minutes you're on your last play, and they practiced having no time for anything, for any more play. So that last 30 seconds, or when it's gone through the red zone,
do it all the time.
All the
time.
And I thought that was really like a really clever way of actually trying to emphasize and sort of promote feeling under that pressure and still being able to execute your plans and things.
Yeah, I mean, the difference with sport, it's easier, if you like, a little bit easier than business, because it's time sensitive, it's finite. A half is 7 minutes. There's a like specific score line that's very clear for you. If you're leading or if you're losing, it's very obvious. We're 5 points ahead, we're 5 points behind, and there are clear parameters as to what scoring does for you. Like, you score a try, you get 5 points. The lines are a lot more vague and blurred within business, and the timelines are not definitive and are more drawn out. But if you like, the premise is still the same. Like, at your time of, if you can practice at executing under extreme pressure in if you like, in the dire seconds of a game, and you can execute and you can deliver, then, and if you can replicate that in your training and that you do every single day, when it comes to that moment in the game where the World Cup hinges on you scoring 3 points in the final 30 seconds or in extra time, whatever else, it's going to feel normal to you. Whereas people get overawed and anxious and overexcited, and therefore make bad decisions. I have this thing that I practice now, which is, feelings drive our emotions, and then our emotions drive our behaviors, and our behaviors drive our decision making. So if you can create scenarios in which you are varying how you feel and what your emotive state is, and then you learn how to manage that and build behaviors that then still result in effective solid decision making at the end of it, you put yourself in a great position. If you don't practice it at all, and then suddenly the proverbial hits the fan, like Brexit or COVID or a World Cup final where you need to win it in the last 30 seconds, your emotions are going to take over you. You're not going to be able to control that scenario of how you feel. And then ultimately your behavior, your decision making and your behaviors will become erratic.
It's quite
inconsistent, and you're probably making mistakes.
It's quite stoic in the way that you sort of approach sort of keeping calm under pressure, and sort of in a way not controlling the emotions. Sometimes it's stoics are sort of deemed as not having emotions, but I think they feel all the way from ancient time. I think that the point is that you're controlling your emotions through your life, and being able to do that actually makes execution easier when you're under pressure.
Well, but if you think about it, the only reason why things go wrong are it's nothing to do, if you like, with the process or the outcome. Like, I know my phone is always my phone. Like, it doesn't really change. It's your reaction and your behavior to that situation that ultimately changes the outcomes and how your experiences of those outcomes. So the only reason why a certain situation feels stressful is because your endorphins and whatever else, your anxiety, your adrenaline levels and whatever else are telling you that, are making you feel that way. And as a result of that, that's driving an emotional reaction inside of you that then triggers certain behaviors that happen when you are feeling in that sort of emotive state. And then that makes these decisions happen. And the more you rehearse that and practice that and get used to that, the better. Just the more adept you are going to be at dealing with that. It's the same as training, right? If I were to say to you, go and run a marathon tomorrow, you would, I don't know, I'm making assumptions here, Mark. I don't know if you are training for a marathon.
I'm not quite there yet. I'm not going to do it tomorrow.
Right, that's what I mean. You can't be marathon ready tomorrow. Whereas if you run 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles progressively over a sustained period of time, you keep exposing your body to that sort of level of stress and duress. When it actually comes to okay, I've got to run 26 miles today, your body will be ready for it. It's not saying it's going to be easy. It's not going to say that you're not going to feel those levels of pain and whatever else, but you'll be much more ready for it and attuned to it than if you just had to rock up and do it tomorrow.
So you've climbed Everest and Kilimanjaro, so you've still got an adventurous streak, even though you've conformed to sort of business life. How do you fit those sorts of adventures in, and what sort of challenges were climbing mountains compared to maybe playing rugby?
Well, to answer the latter part, I love the outdoors. The physical side of life is, in terms of the fitness and that physical, emotional, mental challenge, are the things that I particularly resonate with and enjoy, because I need those endorphins rushing around my body and whatever else. And it engages my mind more. How I do that, and why do I do that? I do that because I love meeting new people. I never do things on my own. I always do it with a group. And I've also got a bit of a philanthropic side to myself. So everything I always do, I try and do for charity. So, across all these different adventures that we've mentioned, or you've mentioned so far, I've raised circa 2.7 million across 3 different charities. So that was the sort of rationale and reason behind that. And that's why I keep doing it as well. And then how do I do it? Don't get me wrong, it's challenging, and particularly with 2 young kids and a job and my wife and everything else, of course, it becomes harder than if I was basically unemployed and single. But I enjoy all those bits of my life. Like, I love my kids, I love my wife, I want those people in my life. It makes the whole thing a much more enriching experience. And then to go out and just bring people with me along the journey, if that makes sense. So a lot of the adventures I've done, cycled across America, John O'Groats to Land's End. I did with my wife. I Kilimanjaro, Everest, I did with my wife's brother. So, and I equally bring some clients with me if they want to do it. I think people have got more often than not, what I found in these things is so many people in life have got all these ambitions to do these things. The only reason why they don't do them is because they actually convince themselves that they can't do them. You know, everybody's day is identical. Everybody has 24 hours in their day. What they choose to do with it is entirely their own prerogative and how they prioritize with it. And those people that talk themselves out of, I could never do it, I'm not fit enough, I can't make enough time, I wouldn't be able to get away from work. You've already
lost.
you've already preventing yourself from doing it until you actually ask the question of like, well, I want to do this, can I try and do this, can I try and do that? And more often than not, it doesn't always work, but people will support you and understand it because they want to come on the adventure with you, and they even admire that you're trying to do something different. And that's why I think lots of people fail in their ambitions. It's no other reason than just themselves.
There's a Henry Ford quote which says something like, I'm going to bastardize the quote again, but he says something like, if you believe you can't, then you won't. And I think in situations, it's people's negativity or people's limiting beliefs that stop them from doing these sorts of challenges.
And that normally is a result of how they feel, right? It's the anxiety of stepping out, that getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, stepping out of that comfort zone and saying, you know what, I am going to go and climb Kilimanjaro. And there's been, or do whatever it is. And there's this huge, I don't know what you want to call it, like negativity or anxiety or worry around not doing it. We have a success culture in general, right, across the globe, where you have to win at all costs. I'm not saying that that's for everyone. I'm stereotyping and generalizing, right? But there's a general consensus that you have to be winning, and it's all about the competition, whatever else at that. And it's not about that. It isn't. And I've only found that out bizarrely. I mean, you're talking to someone that loves the art of competition, but it's not about that. The beauty of all this sort of stuff is not the outcomes. Like my Guinness World Records, they're amazing, but how often do I look at them? What do they mean? Absolutely bugger all. The beauty of it is the actual just getting there and doing it, just having a go, doing the journey and doing it with a load of great people. And that's what's amazing about the whole thing. And that's why I loved it.
Yeah. So you come full circle. We've talked about your rugby career, and we've talked about business extensively today. So you've now gone full circle and you've taken on a head coach of the Wales women's sevens team. So how did that come about, and are you enjoying it?
It came about through a friend of mine, a guy called Ryan Jones, who I used to play against, and he sort of said, look, I need somebody to come in that I trust and knows the game inside and out to help evolve and grow our women's program within Wales and grow some of the sort of best female talent that exists in the country. And he had his faith and confidence in me to do that. Again, when he asked me, I was like, oh my God, what do I know about this? I was hugely excited, but I was also like, oh my God, I haven't coached in forever, and how am I going to make this happen? And if I'm honest, when I first joined, I was more motivated and interested in the sort of strategic side of like, how do we grow the game?
Right.
But when I actually got my hands dirty and started actually coaching and being on the training paddock, and I love that more. I realized it's the human side of life that I love. Now, the numbers are obviously important, massively important, and I am interested in it, but I just love the human side of it, of like nurturing, growing talent and sharing in that journey and that experience with them is the fun part. And that's why the Wales thing has been incredible. COVID has not been that incredible for it, but there we go.
So just wrapping up, I think one of the things that I've sort of taken from speaking to you now for a couple of hours is what you've just said, is the human side of this, whether you're talking about your camaraderie with your rugby players and friends, whether it's joining PwC with little knowledge, but to all your credit, you did an MBA, and all the other things that you've been involved in with these challenges and things. I think for me, just the human side, the human interaction, and I think that's a lot of what people misunderstand about business, is that it is a relationship. It's relationships that you build with people over good times, bad times, that actually make you successful. So any thoughts on the more humane side of business?
Yeah, people buy people. Right, at the end of the day, this is, we are not transacting with robots or whatever in terms of the end product. Like, the end currency is, does it make my life more enriched and better?
Yeah.
Whatever that is, whether it's a process or a product or whatever, right? It's all about, does it save me time? Does it bring me happiness, etc., etc.? It's human interaction at the end of it all, whether or not it's a machine doing a lot of the legwork along the way. It's how much does it enrich me as a human being? And I think we lost sight of that, and I think we're becoming more conscientious of that now. I think you're starting to see much more involvement, and particularly with COVID, I think people are desperate for human interaction, human contact. I think they've realized how important that is now within societies and within communities for that to happen. And it's something that I love and take a lot of pleasure in, which is why I feel very fortunate to have had the experience that I've had and currently do the jobs that I do.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ollie. Thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely fascinating speaking to you. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Mark.
Cheers.